What happens now? You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. Carry on, don't fear the fall, 'cause you'll get over heartache.
Good evening, St. Lucia, and welcome to yet another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. First of all, let me apologize for not having a guest this evening. There was some sort of confused or lost in translation happening, but I think I am quite happy it happened that way because it means that we can have a little chat into my new pet project, and I'm using that word, that phrase, tongue in cheek, because I know there are the naysayers out there who are going to hop or latch onto the phrase pet project, pet being underscored here, and so she ain't serious about this, she's just talking. But you know what? At the end of the day, you will be the one to judge for yourself. I am not the one who has had my name maligned, thrust out there in Nowhereian land, thrashed all about the place, you know, stomped on, mashed up, and then taken water under the unholy bridge, washed off and held up and venerated as if nothing untoward had ever happened, as if my name is now tarnish free. So I want you to sit back and brace yourselves for the ride, not just listening to me, but engaging me. So the lines will be opened a little early and we will discuss a few things. The number to call is 4519788, sorry. And you can also send me your WhatsApp messages on 2846536, or send me whatever issues that you have. If you're not a WhatsApp person, or if it's too long to WhatsApp, or you prefer email at laurajepi@gmail.com. So those are the contact numbers that you can reach me on. And I'm putting it out there early because I don't want you to go anywhere. I want you to stay tuned. I want you to listen. I want you to take in what I'm saying. And bear in mind, I am just as concerned as you are about the issues that are affecting us in St. Lucia, particularly in the South, as I am from the South. And a lot of times people say to me, I'm not hearing your voice on this, I'm not hearing your voice on that. It's because I want to immerse myself and understand for myself and to hear everything that's happening, everything that's being said, and to decipher and to wade through all of the noise and come out with the salient points that impact me, that impact the people of the South. After all, this is the platform for making your stories our stories. And having said that and gotten that out of the way, let's delve in. You must be wondering, what is she talking about? What is she on about? I'm talking about St. Jude's. And if you're listening, and if you've been tuned in, and if you've been watching, for the past few weeks, I have been saying that as much as I am impassioned about women's affairs and children's issues, the St. Jude's Comedy of Errors saga ranks right up there with those other issues. So the last few weeks, first of all, before I continue, or rather should I say second of all, because I've dealt with the first thing that I wanted to deal with. Last week, I've always known that math wasn't my strongest suit, and it really came to the fore. I think I was going to use a word. I think I'm going to have to revise that. We'll have to all children like Haley, hi Haley, are watching and they're listening, and I have to be mindful of that. And as young as she is, I think she's only about 4 or 5, I think I have a responsibility to these children to couch the language that I use so that it impacts them and it leaves a lasting positive impression. After all, this is the time and era where I think the media is as quasi pack and laje pack as much as it has ever been in the past. Anything goes. The language is not censored. Hosts, personalities just say anything and everything with that regard for the finer lines, you know, the in between, the messages, the subliminal messages that could be placed out there. So, my math was a little atrocious last week. I said that St. Jude's, that we used the same, and I say we because it is our business. It's not government business, because the government is made up of men and women from our community, from St. Lucia. So I said that St. Jude was, we used the footprint of St. Jude, which was established in 1945. The building, the structure was built in 1945. But St. Jude, as the hospital, was only established in 1966. So hence we got the 33 and 4 days from 1966 onwards, and 1945 being when the building, the structure was built, was constructed. So that clears up that for us. So the building was constructed in 1945 thereabouts, but St. Jude, the hospital, was commissioned in 1966. So when the hospital, when we're talking about 33 and 4 days, we're talking about 33 years and 4 days. We're talking about from the establishment of St. Jude. Yes. So having cleared that up, those of you who were a little concerned about my math and my years of study, have no fear that I know what I'm talking about. I was just a little excited. So I put two separate issues together. So 33 and 4 days after St. Jude opened, the surgical wing burnt down in 2009, September 9th, 2009. And the structure was built in 1945. So we've got that clear. So as I said to you in the past few weeks, there's a lot of things abounding with St. Jude's, and I call it the Comedy of Errors Project. Now, third thing before I forget, I say I suffer a little bit from mid-timers. So I forget a little bit, and before I forget even further, there was a gentleman who called and who said that he wanted to have a sit down with me and he wanted to correct some of the things that I was saying, and I asked him to not interrupt last week's show to deal with that. Let him send it to me via email, and then we could discuss it subsequently. I just wanted to know that he never sent it. So I still cannot verify or have a sit down with him because he never sent the information that he was talking about. So as I said, in the past few weeks, St. Jude's has a myriad of issues. Even before St. Jude Hospital was burnt down in 2009, or the surgical wing of St. Jude's was burnt down in 2009, there were a myriad of issues lurking just beneath the surface. And I'm beginning to wonder how many institutions, how many buildings in St. Lucia housing important institutions such as the hospital, FRC, the archives, even the National Trust, the government buildings, the courts. How many of these buildings go through an annual checkup, just like we go for our annual medical checkup? How many of these buildings actually go through electrical inspections? How many of these buildings are tested for asbestos? How many of these buildings are tested for air purity? Even the George Odlum Stadium as it is today. When was the last time officials went in there and did a check or an inspection of the electricals, of the air purity in those buildings? Because all of these things impact what happens to us down the road, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. And just because we have survived 30, 40, 50, 60 years before calamity strikes does not mean that we have to continue with our heads buried in the sand. Case in point, FRC. I wonder, when was the last time FRC had an inspection, an electrical inspection? And we still don't know what the cause of the fire at FRC was. We hear Margot Thompson or Thomas talking about near fatalities, not fatalities, that implies a death, but near catastrophes plaguing the archives, fires in the meters. And I know these things are commonplace, even with newer buildings. These things are commonplace. I've experienced that myself. But how often do we take steps to mitigate against these very impending calamities? Do we wait until they strike us before we act? What is our role in mitigating against these things from happening when we have positions of management? Are we only focused with the finance part of it, or are we also equally concerned with the operations? And being concerned with the operations mean that we have to put infrastructure in place, we have to put processes and policies in place whereby the maintenance of buildings, of our buildings, are secured. A lot of the times we build these monuments, I'll just leave it at that, monuments. And we have not factored in how we're going to maintain those monuments. We have not factored how are we going to sustainably run these monuments. They're just buildings. A lot of the times buildings that we cannot even inhabit, because to inhabit it means that we're going to be incurring costs that we have not thought. How are we going to maintain? How are we going to foot the bill? I heard a politician, mind you, a politician say the other day that as a man, and for the most part, let me just clarify something. I'm from the old school West Indian philosophy, and I believe that a man's role indeed is to protect, provide, and to love his family. Okay, whether his family is just a woman or a man, or whether that unit includes children, grandchildren, grandparents, whatever. But I subscribe to that philosophy where a man's role is to provide, protect, and to love his family. Those three pillars. So I could understand the analogy that this politician was driving at. And he said, as a man, it would behoove, it would really impact on your psyche. And I'm paraphrasing, I'm using my own words. But what he said was to the effect that it would weigh heavily on a man's mind if he could not provide for his family. So a man would know that to provide for his family means that he would have to provide shelter. In one instance, he would have to provide shelter for his family. And being a man, knowing that this is what is expected of him, he would go about building a structure to house his family. How he is going to afford that structure is not primary in his mind. What is primary on his mind is that he has to provide this structure. And I'm thinking, okay, you've just opened up a can of worms here, because you don't know how you're going to pay for the structure. You don't know how you're going to pay the electricity. You don't know how you're going to pay for the water. You don't know how you're going to pay the mortgage. You may have lost your job, or you may You may not be working. It opens up a can of worms to not consider the debilitating consequences which could arise from doggedly, with blinders on, tunnel vision, focused on, I need to provide a home for my family. Yes, that's an excellent primary goal to have. But how are you going to maintain that? How would you feel knowing, as a man, that yes, you've provided the home for the family, but you cannot protect the family from being kicked out of that home within 5 years? And I'm being very generous. Because unless you have thought about how you're going to pay the electricity, how you're going to pay the water, how you're going to support the mortgage, how you're going to be able to do all of that, including caring for the children, the wife, and all of the other aspects of providing for your family, you're really not a man. So when that politician said he's going to find out the monies to build the home, and then he's going to think about how he's going to maintain the home and all of these other things, I cringed and I blanched and I thought to myself, holy smokes, thank God this man does not sit in the seat of power. Thank God that this person does not wield authority, management, or otherwise over the fiscal affairs of this country. Because it underscores a number of decisions that have been made in the past, including acceptance of gifts which we have no business accepting. And I'll break it down, trying to break it down to you in the smallest denominator so you can understand the bigger picture. Take a step back and focus on the individual trees to see the big picture. So it's like my boyfriend, I'm using an example, brings home to me a poodle because he knows that I love dogs. So he brings home a poodle, and I willingly and gladly accepts, because here is the man that I love, and he's a man who loves me, thinking about me and giving me the gift of a poodle. So I take this poodle, and you know a poodle is a house dog. I'm talking about the dogs and not the person called the poodle. I'm talking about a dog, a real animal. Those little fluffy things. Yes. So I accept the poodle, which is a house dog, never considering for a moment, I'm rarely ever home, that these dogs, especially the purebred ones, need a lot of attention and care, that I have just built my home, so I am leveraged to the hilt, and I really can't afford vet fees and all of that, and the specialized dog food that I would have to buy. And I have not considered, well, the fact that I come home late at night and that this dog would have been cooped up in the house all day, and that he would want to go out for a run and to do number one and number two, which I really don't have the time to do, despite the fact that I love dogs. So have I done the right thing by accepting this gift? Has my boyfriend really thought about my needs and thought about my lifestyle when preferring this gift of a puppy to me? Knowing that it's never going to grow up to be an outdoor dog, which is probably what I need. That it's never going to be a guard dog, which is probably what I need as a single woman living alone, despite the fact that I have a partner. You know what I mean? Have I done myself a disservice by accepting this gift? And this underscores a lot of decisions that governments have made in this country. So we were offered a gift, and we got a gift. Boy, that's check one against election promises. Or maybe these were not election promises at all, but yes, that will go well when election time rolls around again. And I could say to the people, hey, here's what I have done for you. I have been able to garner the respect and the largesse of friendly governments, and here it is, brand new state-of-the-art hospital that almost 5 years on we cannot inhabit because we don't know how we're going to pay for it. So yes, it may have been a gift, but it's a gift that keeps on asking for things. Electricity, water, maintenance of the structure itself. And I dare say the longer we stay out of the hospital, by the time we get in, there's another set of costs because you have to maintain the structure. It will start calling for repairs even before we get into the structure. And these are some of the decisions that our governments have made for us. And we're so blinded. We have such tunnel vision that we can only see en rouge, or we can only see en jaune. We can't see anything else. People, it's time we stop and take stock of what's happening around us. These guys and gals are sitting up there pretty. And I dare say it may not be money, because some things motivate other people differently. Some people are not motivated by money. Some people are motivated by power, by sitting up there. And the highest honor that a person, a St. Lucian, can ever have bestowed upon them. Leaders of a country, leaders of our country. You don't have to be prime minister to be wielding power. And I dare say a lot of people have that aim, that goal, to be a minister of government, and they never give any thought to what happens when I get there. Yes, I depose my preference in a man to lead a cabinet of men and women, to lead a country. But am I solid enough in my thinking and my ethos and my beliefs to stand up, even if mine is the lone voice, to say, no, I disagree. No, this is not in the benefit of the nation. Because you never know. Your voice might just be that voice which starts a stirring of the minds and think, yeah, boy, I really feel that's the best interest. Sometimes we really have to say thanks, but no thanks. So the OE, the OKEU hospital, the Owen King EU hospital, and I heard a lot of people saying the OKU. It's not OKU, it's the OKEU. There is the E part in front of the U. The OKEU hospital was a gift, a huge gift. We christened it, we named it, nous baptisé. And how many years on? We still cannot move in. And I remember very clearly, distinctly, hearing a person in right up there with all the ministers of government, elected and selected, saying in a forum that this country, St. Lucia, cannot afford to run to hospitals, especially not to hospitals the size and the magnitude of the two that were being constructed at the time. So while we were constructing and while we were accepting, we had no idea how we were going to maintain these hospitals. None. No clue. We were still trying to figure it out and hoping that we would have had a Hail Mary solution. That maybe, hopefully, something would happen and we would have gotten a brilliant idea or struck a stroke of genius on how we were going to maintain these hospitals. And that's why the hospitals remained closed for so long. Well, one remained closed and one was continuously being constructed. And so we find ourselves in a situation where our healthcare has never been worse. And that, my dear friends, that, my brothers and sisters, and I'm beginning to sound like a politician here, this brothers and sisters thing, that is the crux of the matter. What are we going to do about it? We have a healthcare system which is so broken, it may as well be annihilated. We, doctors, nurses, patients, citizens, we never demanded better. Never demanded better. And government, administration after administration have been really kicking us in the teeth and convincing us that no, it doesn't hurt. Convincing us no, it doesn't hurt. Because we're so blinded. We're so blinded, we only want to see one color. Well, now it has come to a head. We have the OKEU hospital that is closed, or for the most part, you have some sections of it being used now, and I'm so grateful. I am so grateful, and that sounds so asinine, saying I am grateful that the dialysis unit is operational, which means that more of our sick citizens can be dialyzed. But it's asinine in that I should not be grateful that a part of the hospital is opened. I should have that, not luxury, I should have that right. I should have that right that if I fall ill, I should be able to, in my country, seek medical attention in my country and not be fearful that I will go in with one issue and come out with another issue. Because that's what's happening currently in our hospitals. Our patients are going in with one issue and coming out with a myriad of others, not directly related or indirectly related to what they went into the hospital with in the first place. We're due for a break. When we come back, we'll discuss more about the OKEU hospital and delve into the St. Jude's Comedy of Errors saga. Stay tuned.
You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache.
Thank you for staying tuned to what's happening now with Laura. And in the first segment, I gave you a little preamble on some of the things that have been happening and the impact accepting gifts that we have no business accepting because it does not fit into what we are able or capable of doing with it. So it's like having a brand new toy or a piece of equipment, a computer that can print 200 sheets in 2 seconds, and it can scan and it can we can bind 200-page documents, but the ink that it uses costs us $500 a pop and it only lasts a month. What am I doing with that when I'm never going to bind or I'm never going to print 200-page documents? I'm only going to be printing 1 page or a sheet of a document every 2 weeks or whatever. Is it necessary to accept a gift like that that's costing me more to maintain than to keep? I gave the example of a dog, of a puppy, given a poodle, a house dog. When really and truly what I need is an outdoor guard dog because I'm never home. So on the 21st of February 2016, after much haggling, after much haranguing by the EU over the Millennium Facility, we spent, I think it was about $100,000 to name the Millennium Facility. And we named it the Owen King EU Hospital. And oh my gosh, what a festivity, largesse! People were overjoyed because it meant that soon, very soon, somewhere in the near, not too distant future, we were going to be presented, the doors would be open wide for us to make use of this state-of-the-art facility found nowhere else in the Caribbean. 2016, February of 2016, mind you. That went on, February went on, March, April, May, June, hospital still closed. We're now in April of 2018, hospital still closed. I remember watching the entertainment from my couch at home. And one of the things that really struck me was the Victoria Hospital chorale. Oh, the doctors and the nurses, they put on a show, boy. They put on a show. And who can blame them? They were ecstatic. The hospital was named, which meant that they would be moving into the state-of-the-art facility, rendering service like they've never rendered before because the conditions were right. The conditions were right. The conditions were right then, but I don't think the conditions were right up till now. It's like naming a child, but telling that child you've got to wait for 5 years, or you baptize a child rather, and tell that child you're going to have to wait for 5 years before you can practice in that faith. Or even naming the child and saying, no, you can only respond to that name, but you can't do anything else in that name, if you follow my drift. Today, we hear that the Medical Association is singing a different song. Let's hear what they have to say. Are we there? Okay, so we're having a little difficulty, but as soon as it's ready, we'll come on. So yes, so in 2016, on the 21st of February, on the eve of our 37th independence anniversary, the staff of VH were ecstatic. Ecstatic because after all, and who can blame them? Because shortly after naming the facility, we all expected the hospital to be reopened, and in 2018 to date we still don't have a date as to when the hospital is going to be open. And even if they were to tell us a date, we wouldn't believe them. And you know why? Because administration after administration has not fallen through on any dates that they've given us. So meanwhile, while we're naming the OKEU hospital in the south, construction is bustling in the south at the St. Jude Hospital. And St. Jude the St. Jude Hospital had a very, wow, what's the word should I use? It's amazing. It's amazing, really, that from 2009, it can only be amazing. It can only be termed as amazing that from 2009, we would have been housed, our hospital in the South would have been housed at a stadium which, at best, was already deteriorating. It had already shown signs of wear and tear. Even though it had been ill used, it had not been used very frequently, but over time, even if a building is just sitting there without being used, it will show signs of wear and tear. So we moved into this because it was the only structure that could facilitate rooms and the free flow of movement and sectioning off to temporarily house a hospital. So we started in 2009. We moved in to St. Jude's. Now, I'm looking at a document, and the persons who put together this document said that since then, since 2009, the St. Jude Hospital continues to function commendably at the George Odlum Stadium to the credit of management and staff of the hospital. And I want to ask the question, does the person understand what the meaning of the word commendably is? Because it is commendable nothing. It is commendable nothing. You have human beings at the lowest ebb of their lives in a structure sharing a compound with animals, cows, and horses. The first thing that comes to mind is fleas and ticks. And we know, those of us who have dogs and animals on which fleas and ticks reside, that they're not going to confine themselves to this, their host. They're going to move around in search of fresh blood. In 2018, we are housed in a compound seeking medical attention, and we're sharing that compound with animals, and we think it's okay. We think it's okay, it's acceptable for our practitioners to come to work daily, bow their heads, shake their heads, and say, boy, what am I doing here? And not voice their displeasure. If I were a doctor or a nurse, and praise God that I'm not, because I can't stand the sight of blood, get squeamish, I would have been a radical one. And whilst my oath, the oath that I would have taken is to first do no harm, I would be a radical doctor. I would be a radical doctor. And I would demand of all the administrations that we've had since this saga began to remove us from there. I don't care where you put us, but you got to remove us from there. This is not fit. It's not fit for human habitation. Not fit. So, the hospital, St. Jude Hospital, burnt in 2009. And the initial goal was to rebuild St. Jude to reinstate healthcare as we knew it before. So we wanted to, and I say we because it's our government, we wanted to rebuild or to reinstate or to make habitable or to replace the burnt structure. That was the surgical wing that got burned down in 2009. And to expand where necessary. I'm paraphrasing, from this report. So the initial project was to rebuild St. Jude Hospital, to reinstate the core and ancillary health services previously offered to the hospital, and to expand where necessary. So the initial policy decision, the government of St. Lucia initially took a decision to develop a two-pronged approach to the implementation of St. Jude Hospital reconstruction project. A, the short-term solution, temporary accommodation for St. Jude Hospital. This would entail the reconstruction of the surgical building on the old site, as well as the renovation of the other two buildings and other required auxiliary buildings. Auxiliary buildings. The facilities would be made fully functional to allow St. Jude Hospital to relocate from the stadium and operate until the new facility is built on a new site. So even from then in 2009, the government then, the administration then, wanted in as short a space as possible, so they say, to get the patients out of George Odlum Stadium and bring them back to St. Jude. So they wanted to replace the surgical wing, renovate the other buildings as needed, because, of course, c'est là unia bobo ka sab okay bobo sa pa jewi puchi pa jewi oh money sugar or kisa, and that's when we know all the little different things that we never took heed, or we never paid any attention to. So now we want, okay, since I have that, let me change this, let me do this, and I mean, let me try to be a little bit better than I was before I had this issue. So the first approach was a short-term solution to reconstruct the surgical building and to renovate the auxiliary buildings to relocate from the stadium. The second medium-term solution was a construction of a new healthcare facility for St. Jude Hospital on a new site. This would entail the planning, design, and construction of a new 90-bed healthcare facility for St. Jude Hospital at a new site in Beauséjour. So when we hear this administration talking about relocating St. Jude, that is not the first time that this has come up. Even before, in 2009, there was already talk of a new hospital being built. So this would entail the planning, design, and construction of a new 90-bed healthcare facility for St. Jude Hospital at a new site at Beauséjour in the vicinity of George Odlum Stadium and future site of the National University. Now, mind you, that was their plan, but I don't recall that ever being made a big, a big issue, and I don't know that there was any consultation on that. But again, that was the initial thinking. Upon relocation of St. Jude Hospital to this new facility, the old site buildings would be utilized for other medically related purposes, such as a medical research or medical schools. The rationale for constructing the new facility is as follows. It would facilitate a synergy with the National Vision Plan and act as a catalyst for redevelopment of the South in general. Its functions would be expanded for use as a teaching facility. It would be used to facilitate healthcare tourism and serve St. Lucians, Caribbean nationals, as well as other foreign nationals with specialized healthcare services. So that was the two-pronged approach. Further to that, oh, and by the way, construction began not in the same 2009. Remember, the hospital burned down in September 2009, but 1 year afterwards, construction commenced. Construction commenced then, but apparently funding and financing for all of those grandiose ideas was not, they were not in place yet. But kudos to Stephenson King at the time. His main focus, albeit tunnel visioned, his main focus at the time was to get these patients out of the stadium, a facility meant for sportsmen and women, for entertainment, for sporting activities, get them out of this place and take them back to the hospital. And what better ode to the 4 lives that were lost? That other lives would not be compromised by giving them substandard service are in a place that is not equipped for that kind of service. So the renovations works at the original site was expected to be completed for reopening the following year. So at the time, the administration at the time anticipated that the works that they envisioned to take place would have taken 1 year. 1 year. Rebuild a wing, renovate the other two existing wings, extend where it needs extending, and to move these patients from the stadium, as I said to you last week, the hospitalium, and move them back into a bona fide hospital. However, due to the nature of the project, it was initiated in phases to allow for simultaneous design and implementation. So you're beginning to get an idea of what's going on. We need to get these people out. We're just going to be rebuilding this wing. We're not changing the square footage significantly. We just need to rebuild this and to bring them back in. So while they're doing this, they're thinking, they're planning, and they're building all at the same time. Now, although the main building, the report continues, although the main building damage in the fire was the surgical building, government took the decision to undertake a wide-scale renovation of the facility as other components were in a state of disrepair. The buildings were originally built in the 1940s, as I said to you earlier, and continue to pose a risk to the operations of this important healthcare facility at that location. So remember what I said to you, after 1940, 45, this building was constructed, a lot of things could have gone wrong. So this included degraded electrical infrastructure, asbestos roofing material on all buildings, asbestos lagged pipelines, inadequate water storage and wastewater treatment, and the general dilapidated building infrastructure. So as they've gone in there, as I said, I have this cut, it's not healing, I have to find out what's going on. I've gone to the specialist, and now I've discovered that I have diabetes. It's gotten so far that it's already affecting my kidneys, and I need to do this and I need to do that to ensure that my body does not turn in on itself. Get the picture? So they went in there to rebuild the surgical wing, but then they found all of these other things that they may have known before, we have no way of knowing, but things that they could no longer afford to ignore. So while you're in there, why not just do it right away? And this is where we start with the comedy of errors. So we don't have, as has been suggested before, DCA approval, because there is no approval to be had, because you're not, if I understand the way DCA works, you're not changing the square footage of the building, you're just rebuilding, so whatever stood there stands. At this point, I want us to hear what we talked about earlier about the OKEU hospital, and the fact that the nurses and the doctors, they were all singing joyful, joyful, no mountain high enough, and all of that. Now let's hear what they have to say in 2018. The song has changed completely. Let's hear them.
The statement by the Medical and Dental Association follows an earlier press conference in which it expressed concern about developments in the health sector. The press conference was followed by 2 meetings with the Prime Minister. Despite those meetings, the association continues to complain about a lack of transparency on the part of the government. In fact, it says it's learning of many of the decisions impacting the sector from the media. In the statement, Association President Alphonsus St. Rose laments the conditions at the Victoria and St. Jude hospitals, which he says are currently facing stresses of immense proportions. He says the deplorable circumstances in which doctors and nurses are expected to deliver healthcare services to the public accounts for the poor quality of the island's healthcare, the delivery of the outcomes, and of course increasing numbers of unwarranted deaths. Following a recent tour of the St. Jude Hospital site, the association has submitted a list of recommendations to the government. Among the recommendations is the suggestion that the completion of the St. Jude's Hospital reconstruction project be done in a phased manner and completed by no later than February of 2019. In order to alleviate the conditions at the George Odlum National Stadium, the association has called for priority to be given to completing the East Medical Wing at the new hospital reconstruction site, which can house all critical departments presently operational at the stadium. The St. Lucia Medical and Dental Association strongly advocates that both the Owen King EU Hospital and St. Jude Hospital remain public for the benefit of all citizens, and that the Owen King EU Hospital Board be established within 1 month to conform to the legal requirements established in the MHMC Act of 2015. It is calling for the NIC to be considered as the principal provider of the National Health Insurance Scheme proposed by the government, and says it is willing to assist in shaping this initiative alongside the government and other stakeholders. The St. Lucia Medical and Dental Association requested that the government engage all stakeholders and the public on these healthcare matters at earliest in an honest, objective and transparent manner as promised by the Prime Minister.
Now, hear this, what they're saying. They're saying that exactly what this report said, that previous administration, the first administration that took on this burnt hospital, the very first thing, the very same thing that they initially said, a phased approach. Let us build this, let us renovate, let us move the people in, let us take the time off now. All the stress is off our shoulders. Our people are back in the hospital, and then figure out what we're going to do next. That is what the plan was. Why was that plan not followed? Yes, there were things that we saw that was necessary, but these things that we now, oh my God, we cannot turn a blind eye to. All of a sudden, we can't forget about it. We can't look the other way. These things were there before. These things were pre-existing conditions. And tell me, why is it that nobody, no previous health minister, no inspector, no head of the nurses or head of the doctors or medical president of the medical board, no CEO, nobody ever saw fit to put their foot down and say, listen, there are issues. Call a press conference. Speak to the nation. There are issues with the hospital. And a hospital is a place where you're supposed to go to convalesce. And the issues plaguing the hospital have the potential to make people sick, to make people sicker, because you're already coming in sick and you're thinking, I'm just coming in for a 2-day stay, a minor surgery here, and for me to leave. But instead we have all these complications. Instead we have people being discharged in the morning and dead before their loved ones can come and get them out of the hospital. We have this happening right here in St. Lucia, where patients are being discharged. The doctor comes in, does their rounds. Okay, you're fit to go home. I discharge you. Papers are signed. And by the time the loved ones come down to the hospital, by the time they get to the hospital, oh, by the way, I'm so sorry to inform you, despite the fact that we discharged your mom or your brother or your wife or your sister, that patient has succumbed to their illness. What were you sending the patient home for in the first place? It means that the patient could not get the care that was necessary. So, all good and well that the Medical Association is standing up now and saying, but you should have thought of that before while you were singing and dancing. Yeah, because that has been done to us too many times in the past. We're offered a dangling carrot, and I will never forget, and I will continue to lament the fact that a previous health minister kept coming to us year after year and saying, this is the last year. This is the last Christmas that we're spending, knowing full well there is no way between the span of time that they come to us and tell us that there's no way that we could move into out of out of the hospitalium into the new hospital. No way. Now, before we go on our break and open up the lines to you, issues and challenges and constraints. Financial resources were not available at the commencement of the project to facilitate the vision articulated and the policy direction. Yet still, we kept adding and adding, but we don't have the money. We had not sourced the funding. Even when there was a government change, even when there was an acceptance, an adaptation, and a review of the policy, the money wasn't there, but we're changing this and put this there and add this piece here. And instead of going linear, we're going all over the place. All over the place. Ti office palati or ti kwe pala. Oh my God, like seriously, people? Would it have behooved us to move into the hospital, to complete one phase, move into the hospital and determine whether this structure fully met the needs and the vision for the people of the South? Could we not have taken the time and to sit back and to plan and to articulate what we want done, get the proper professional minds? Because at the end of the day, I don't know that we have anybody in St. Lucia who has the expertise of building hospitals, who can guide us. And I'm certain, I am absolutely certain that there are bodies, that there are institutions whose primary purpose is to offer that kind of assistance, institutional strengthening, guide us, tell us, this is suggest, put a tender or two out there. But no. We decide that it's not good enough. Our initial plan, our initial focus was not good enough. We're going to muddy the waters because we want to score cheap political points. And that's all it is, cheap political points. I don't think ever in the minds of any of these politicians that there was ever a clue as to, or an aim rather, not a clue, an aim as to, we want to move these people into this place. Maybe initially, but as time went by and funding started trickling in, I am asking the question, I am asking the question, was there a laundromat somewhere in there? $100 million later, no hospitalium, and hospitalium is falling apart. And that has beleaguered the whole process. Lack of financial continuity. So, and that brings me to another point. Why is it that we continue to lap up every time a politician comes to us and says to us, I will do this, I will do that, and we know they have no clue because they're not in there. It's like an accountant coming and tell me I can grow your business from just looking at the outside structure. I can grow your business just by looking at the number of people walking through the store. I can help you save this. I can help you in 5 years expand your business and have your bottom line this wide just by looking out on the outside, by not having a look at the books to see whether it is possible what they're promising. It's time we stop and start thinking. And let me tell you something. When I say stop and start thinking, let us not be conditioned by the has-beens, the was-beens, the wannabes, the ones that a few years ago, they were the worst thing to ever happen to politics in St. Lucia. They're holding secrets all over the place for their worst. And it is not okay. It is not okay simply because two people who for all intents and purposes despise each other's guts to go to bed because they have a common enemy. Politics, especially in small island nations like ours, should not be so malicious. It should not be so malignant. Yes, we can have adversaries. because we have opposing views. That is human nature. But it should not be that we have enemies to the point that it becomes personal. That it becomes personal. So I'm imploring you, if you cannot trust the messenger, why are you trusting the message? And that goes for me too. If you don't trust me, I don't expect you to be listening to anything I have to say. Take it with a grain of salt. Because I certainly wouldn't do the same for you if I do not trust you. If I do not trust you. So if you do not trust certain political figures, why is it that the message is the Holy Grail? Why is it? Why is it that we take as gospel truth the words of men and women who were in the seat of power, who wielded the power to effect change? They didn't do it. But on the outside, we will do this once given back the reins. We can do this. Really? And we want to talk about hypocrites, but that's for another show. The hypocrites. That's for another show. We want to talk about hypocrites because today I say something and I don't have the right to change my mind tomorrow. I don't have the right to change my mind tomorrow when circumstances change. Or even though circumstances have not changed, but things happen that I now can say, maybe I was wrong. It's as if because I find in one area of your life, in one area of your business, you have been found wanting, that in every other aspect, that parlor which is cast over that segment should cover everything else. Really? We want to talk about hypocrites, but that's for another show. That's for another show. People have lost every respect that they had in certain quarters because of some people. And today we just take them, sprinkle unholy water over them and say, water under the bridge, and hold them up and say the new coming of Christ. Really? Really? So, back to the issues and challenges, financial resources. The project was initiated as a result of an emergency and did not go through the normal project development cycle of similar projects, which is historically 5 to 10 years prior to physical implementation. So we have to sit and think about things for 5 to 10 years. We have to hash it out, thrash it out. We want to do this. We want to do it this way. No, we can't do it this way because if we do it this way, that's going to happen. It takes 5 to 10 years. So why were we rushing the hospital, the St. Jude Hospital? Again, I asked the question, was there a laundromat in effect? That's what the report says. It takes 5 to 10 years for a normal project development, a normal project development cycle of a similar project. But yet we tried to do it. We demanded it to happen in 1 year. We tried to do it in 5 years. It didn't happen. And what we ended up with was just a hodgepodge, a mixture of things that we don't know how to make it work. And now we're talking about scrapping and starting over. So we had to scrap the initial policy direction of basic renovation and develop a new project on a new site. Again, project implementation commenced on the original site in September 2010 with minimal funding to facilitate only the short-term solution. So we had the short-term solution funding, but we didn't have anything else. But then again, it would have taken us 5 to 10 years to even get a feasible project plan together. That's 2 terms of a government, 2 terms of an administration. And maybe if the administration changed, then with our history of scrapping things just because we were the ones who initiated it, that would have been a very real possibility. But we're due for a break. When we come back, the lines will be open and you will be calling me to tell me what you think. Already the messages have been coming in and I will share that with you. Stay tuned. We will see you at the other side of the break. Welcome back, and this is your segment where you can now call in and to share your own opinions of what I've presented to you and share your own views on the healthcare situation. As I said, indicated to you earlier in the last segment, we have a number of WhatsApp messages, and I'm hoping that I can get through all of the calls. So please, I'm imploring you, when you call, please keep your contribution very brief. Only the salient points, because I know there are a number of people who already want to call and to share their opinions. So we don't have the luxury of a 5-minute conversation. So the calls have started coming in. You are on the air. Thank you for calling.
Hi, good evening. Laura, like you
Hello.
said, to be short, and I will be short and sweet. I would like to speak on the matter of what you said last week and this week on the hospital in Vieux-Fort.
Yes.
I'd also like to speak on a matter that was said after you with Richard Frederick, and I'd like to speak on a matter of what is going on in England.
Okay, so now let us make it as brief as possible, because a number of people are
I'm going to
waiting.
start with the Richard Frederick. You went to Vieux-Fort and you tried to explain to St. Lucians what you saw, in your perspective, what was going on in Vieux-Fort and how you saw the project. That is your perspective. You use your arms, you use all kinds of things to show how the project was. Richard Frederick on his show on Thursday said that you are not an engineer first. You went and measured this with your arms, and you this and you that, and all kind of nonsense. And he said, you know, he also used, I think, a clip from an engineer. So I am agreeing with him to some point, and I'm disagreeing with him to another point, because Richard Frederick has put himself in a point whereby he feels everybody's scared of him in St. Lucia. And he needs to understand, he needs to know his place. Because as a citizen, and he can use the television and tell the whole of St. Lucia what he feels, you also can give your point of view. And what you saw was that an incomplete hospital, from what the Labour Party was saying. Every year we were supposed to be getting a hospital. Every year, Alvina Reynolds came on people's television and said that we're getting a new hospital. They left power, they stayed 5 years, and we still don't have a hospital. So you went to Vieux-Fort and you told the people of St. Lucia, we don't have a hospital. It's not close to what he's saying. Where I can agree with him is the point whereby, I mean, maybe you should have taken a tape with you and you could have actually gave some measurements and gave St. Lucians a little fat. I can understand that point. But he needs to be very careful. He feels he can just bombard people and make people look bad. He needs to stop this nonsense, because he's always been in St. Lucia. He says he's from the South, and if he's from the South and he's for the people of the South, he himself, as a free citizen, could have gone to Vieux-Fort and also said how he saw the hospital. And the 5 years the Labour Party was there, he should have stood up and said that, hurry up, finish the hospital, and not now, because he wants to use politics and make people look like idiots in the South and use people to his demise, try and make you look stupid. So I can understand with him at some point, but he needs to be very careful how he handles the situation. Now, I did him. The British system, I think it is time St. Lucia stand on their 2 feet and say, you know what, Britain has insulted us too much as a Caribbean region, has insulted us too much as a country, and it may be time that we move that stupid thing they call Governor General and put the head of state of St. Lucia, put the head of state responsible for St. Lucians, not representing the Queen, because the Queen does not care about us. The Queen does not care about our people. For you to tell me people left the region so long ago to go to England to help develop your country, and just like Trump, like an idiot as these people are, these politicians are, they're saying that these people do not have citizenship, their children do not have citizenship. This is an insult. From slavery, these people have just been putting us down, and up to this day, they're not changing. So I ask this government, I ask Alan Chasney to revise that thing about Governor General. You understand? Make it maybe a Governor General, whereby, yes, you're a Governor General, but you represent the people of St. Lucia, not the head of state, not the Queen of England. Or put, like Germany, the German system, put a Counselor General. That's what we need to have, a Counselor General in St. Lucia who represents the people of St. Lucia, not the Queen. Move the Queen on our paper. This is nonsense.
Thank you so much for your impassioned contribution. And I've always liked when this caller calls. And let me just to deal with your first thing about Richard Frederick. Richard Frederick, to me, is a non-entity. Richard Frederick has promised the people of St. Lucia time and time again that he's going to answer it all, and he's never even been able to clear his name. So what he has to say cannot affect me at all. We have another call. You're on the air.
Good night, Laura.
Good night, dear. How are you?
First time for call.
How
First
are
time
you?
caller.
Oh, you're a first-time caller. Welcome.
Yes. Politics is killing our country.
Absolutely.
You
What
see,
else is new?
These guys are there for their friends.
Absolutely.
You know, they have to find a way to pay back.
Absolutely.
St. Jude's Hospital could have been completed right now
Should have been.
if they had taken it in phases.
I agree 100%.
You know, they want to come and make a big show, this and that and that and that. But at the end of the day, they didn't even have to move to the stadium. St. Jude's have enough land around where they could have occupied, have mobile wards, whilst they're working on the burnt area and using the other side. You know, do it in phases, just do it right there and then. But all this money they spend over there at the stadium, to get the stadium working as per hospital, what do they do with all that? That's money going down the drain. You understand? So then politicians need to put the act together. And if they want to run the country, run the country. If they want to stay out of it, just stay out of it. You understand? Because they are
Absolutely.
just killing the country. Left, right, and center. All of them are the same bunch of shit.
Thank you so much for your contribution. I hear you loud and clear. I disagree with you in the point that about them remaining on, that they didn't have to move. They had to. There's a lot of damage. And again, as I said, there was asbestos. There's a burnt wing in the middle of the whole structure. Remember, the structure is in 3 pieces. So they absolutely had to move. But I think that they could have they could have done the renovation works in phases. I absolutely agree with you on that. We have another call online. You're on the air.
Hi, good night, Laura.
Hi, good night. How are you?
Good, and you?
I'm not too bad, thanks.
Okay. I think it's time they stop playing politics, and it's time they do something about the hospital. We have to understand that it's human beings at this hospital, and it's not safe. The building is not safe. The environment is not safe. The air is not safe for patients to breathe. I mean, you'd go to St. Jude's with a headache. You come back home with a cough, a rash, because the place is not ventilated. There's no ventilation, and you have AC in there, and all viruses and bacteria just circulating. So all these things are not good for the patients to breathe. So it's high time these people look into the condition of the hospital and think about the patients and their health, their well-being, and stop playing politics with these things. And if they have to finish the hospital or do something to get the people out of this place.
Absolutely. I agree
Yeah.
with you 100%,
Yeah.
caller. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for calling.
Okay, good night.
Good night. And I couldn't agree with this caller anymore. I mean, I have heard the horror stories. I have heard the horror stories of the ticks. I've heard the horror stories of patients being discharged and then dying on the way out of the hospital. We have another call. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Laura.
Good evening, dear. How are you?
Two things, Is one thing when somebody has gone somewhere and know the actual fact, and somebody who has never been and can just talk. Okay? I saw your pictures at St. Jude's. I'm watching what you saw, and afterwards you came and you said what you noticed. In spite of this is not your field, being a builder or engineer or whatever, but you actually went down. You did not listen to what people say. According to my mother, you went and make your eye cook your peas.
Correct.
Okay? And your eye cook your peas. So when anybody comes and they themselves never been, still do not make that an issue. Because for me, I believe it is high time that if they had only stuck with what Stevenson King had on paper to renovate what needs to be done and move the people back to the hospital, and then they can think of something
What's the
else.
next
If-
move? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to build something new, but you have the people in the existing hospital, you do not occupy the stadium for 20 years, and after 20 years you cannot get a hospital. I believe that was the best thing to do. But again, when people thinking like from the head to the foot, that is what happened. Because no vision, no sight, it's just like chaos, like the blind leading the blind.
Absolutely.
Laura.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And it's true. And it's like I said, the very first caller said that maybe I should have did measurements. I used myself because I think by using myself, you can get a clear picture of what we're dealing with. I'm not the tiniest person. So when I stand in a doorway and two of me can pass through the doorway, it tells you something. I could tell you figures, but a lot of us will not be able to make the connection between of the figures that I'm using. We have another call online. You're on the air.
Laura, good night.
Good night, dear. How are you?
I did not about holding on.
Okay.
Let
Talk
me
to
say something there to you.
Uh-huh.
I listen to all the callers.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who are right, those who are wrong, those who don't understand construction, those who don't know nothing.
Okay.
Let me put you on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
You see, if we are consider ourselves as a human being, we are thinking right, you will not get much problem. But the biggest problem of society is human beings. Let me say something straight to you.
Mm-hmm.
That hospital started under Stevenson King.
Mm-hmm.
Stevenson King, before he left, there was another plan to extend the hospital to have it a better hospital than just renovating it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Labour Party came into power. They didn't stop the work. They continued it. King and them did not left no money there. They had to go and borrow money to do whatever needs to be done. Okay? If you all will consider yourself as a human being like everybody, all of us get sick. All of us don't know when we getting sick, when we are dying. Okay? So when I hear people talking all sort of crap, nonsensical and irrelevant statement, it's outrageous and they're making no sense. That's why I've always say in St. Lucia, a lot of them call themselves big man, big woman, and at the end of the day, they know example to themselves and their children. That's why we have a lot of crime taking place in St. Lucia. The social fabric of this country left a lot to be desired. You know why? Because we think too much selfish, greedy, nasty in all fashion, all facets, etc., etc. Now, with the hospital, St. Jude Hospital, if the UWPU came in, had continued hospital, and also the people will be there, one. Number two, a hospital, the minimum it takes is 8 years.
What do you mean 8 years? When you say the minimum it takes is 8 years?
The minimum a hospital takes to build is 8 years.
Okay. And you
Now,
know,
listen to me carefully. Just listen,
hold on. Sir, hold on. No. You hold on. And how did you come up with the 8 years? And don't forget, we have other callers on the line, so try to wrap it up. How did you come up with the 8 years?
That's what I'm trying to do.
How did you come up with the 8 years?
Laura,
how did you come up with the 8 years?
In construction. I've been
okay, and you've built hospitals before. You've built hospitals before?
No, listen to me. I said I've been supervised schools and I know about buildings because that's my construction I deal with.
Awesome. Moving on.
So what I'm saying to you today, the minimum years a hospital takes to build is 8 years. One. Number two, now it take 8 years pending not only money, if there is money available, but also the whole concept of the equipment you're going to use, because every year sometimes equipment change, you have to be remodified, you have to do this to bring it to modern technology. So there are times when the way you build a place, you have to break it down, and whatever it is has to be done. You see, the problem we have in St. Lucia, A lot of us think we are technicians, we are this, we are that, and at the end of the day, we are nothing.
Okay,
The
thank you so
important
much.
thing is that you are dealing with human beings, and let's get the social fabric of this country continue and get the hospital built and finish it. And it's time for St. Lucians to start getting up on the backside and see whatever going wrong in St. Lucia. No matter they have Labour and they have UWP,
Okay.
forget about it because you are born Lucian.
Thank you
It's time
so much
that
for your
crap to stop,
contribution.
and people don't know nothing about building.
Thank
or
you so
hospital,
much.
whatever it is.
Thank
So
you.
come and-
Thank
come
you
and
so
talk
much
to
for
our
your
innocent
contribution.
there.
Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution. Yes, because I could tell that there's going to be a degeneration of language here. And that happens sometimes when we get excited. And I didn't say in the preamble that we have youngsters like little Haley watching, and we wanted to make sure it's civilized. We have another call online. You're on the air. You're our last caller for this evening.
So your last caller, apparently there is only one size of hospital. Apparently that
I don't know.
hospital must be built in 8
8
years, and
years.
it cannot be before. It
It-
cannot be
yeah,
after.
yeah,
Apparently, if you have a hospital with 10 or 50 workers trying to build that hospital,
Yeah.
it has to take eight
Eight
years. You see
years.
the stupidity we are going
Well,
down.
I don't want to think it that way, because in his mind, that his opinion, that
Everything
his
politicians
perspective.
feed these people. They just say these labor rights do not think. And let me
Let's not
step
call
back.
him
Let
a
me not
labor
say
right, because we don't know,
St.
yes.
Lucians need to think. They need to process. Everybody is not an engineer, but we're all not dumb. A hospital does not have to take 8 years for it to finish. That is something the politicians feed to you all, and you all want to just say it as fact. The politicians sometimes don't even know what they're saying. A hospital does not have to take 8 years. A hospital can be finished in 2 years, 3 years. If you, the mister who just called, went overseas, you would see other hospitals around the world being built within 8 years, before 8 years, and even after 8 years. The point is that St. Jude's had no plan. There was no plan for St. Jude's. And I'm blaming Stevenson King, I'm blaming Kenyans, and I'm blaming all of them. Because someone should have stopped and said, but wait a minute, where is the plan? Where are we going? How much money are we throwing into this cash cow? You understand? There should have been a break. So you know what is the best thing that happened there? Alan Chasney said, hey, wait. What is going on? How we keep putting money into St. Jude's and nothing is happening. That is the best thing he did, St. Lucia. What I'm saying is, what the problem right now we find is that he's saying that we need to build a new hospital. And to me, the finance, the amount of money that has gone into that present hospital, the amount of resources that has gone into that hospital, to me, we should, to respect the people who died in that hospital, to respect the funds that St. Lucian placed in that hospital, to respect just the fact that that hospital has served the South for so long historically, we should try and finish the hospital.
Thank you so much for that. You're our last caller, and we have to wrap it up here. The penultimate caller talked about 8 years. I don't know where he would get that, and I wanted to ask him whether he had built hospitals before. And there was a reason why I was asking that, is because I think that's the problem in the first place. Because I think all of the contractors and all the builders that we've had in this whole comedy of errors is that they didn't have a concept. They didn't have any idea as to, oh, okay, are we renovating? Are we just building this, rebuilding a one wing, or are we building something completely new? And if we're going to be building something completely new, state of the art, what is our experience? What is our experience? I have all the respect in the world for John Peters, but at the end of the day, does he have? I mean, and I know he talked about completion of what exists on the ground. So I can't find fault with him on that. He's talking about completion of what's on the ground right now. But is it the best thing? Is it the best? If he were given the job, is that what he would have presented to the people of St. Lucia? Is my argument. Now, before we go, we have a few WhatsApp messages that came way early. Some people are saying that, somebody says, until I hear jail or refund, sorry, it's about 7 years now. This is taking too long. We're talking for too long. So this caller wants to hear about responsibility, accountability. Who's responsible for the mess that we're in, and how are we holding them accountable? Are we talking a refund? Are we talking jail time? This is gross negligence, this whole saga. I mean, everybody and anybody who is negligent in this whole thing has to be held accountable. Somebody else says, here's a question. For years, the airport have conducted simulations which must involve the St. Jude's Hospital, which is the nearest medical facility to convey the injured, but SLASPA has always given the simulation response a success. Isn't that strange? Food for thought. Food for thought. We have a few others here. I don't know, and I can't. So many. I can't go through the emails because it's so many and they're so long. And then there's this other person who sent me a voice note, and I'm going to just paraphrase and saying that people come into the hospital with one thing and they're leaving with other things, other ailments, you know, and then that the air purification of the hospitadium is to that person's mind severely compromised, and they want to know what's happening with that. So lots of issues, lots of complaints, especially from the people of the South, and every St. Lucian should take up this mantle and say, you know, if this compound is not good enough to house a hospital, is the hospitadium. If this compound is not good enough to host a hospital, what are we doing about it? If this compound is not good enough and we have to rebuild, when are we starting? These are all questions that we all must ask, and we must not let up until the answers are given. We spent $100,000, sorry, $1 million, $1 million, near $1 million to conduct a commission, or we commission an inquiry. We have the report. We know what took place, where the money went, where the money did not go. What are we going to do? We have suggestions. We have the technocrats telling us, giving us the suggestions and options, giving us options of what to do. Isn't it high time? It's almost a year. Isn't it high time that we effect one of these options? Isn't it high time that this current administration comes to us and say, despite what happened in the past, this is what we have found, and in our estimated wisdom, our collective wisdom, this is the direction that we are going to be taking. And while we're doing this, here's how we're going to hold those persons responsible accountable. That's all we want to know. In this country, there has been enough mismanagement of projects, money just going down the drain, and nobody is held accountable. And there's a fallacy that we subscribe to, that because we've spent a huge sum of money on a project, that we cannot abandon the project, even though the project is going to consume a lot more financial resource. I'm not saying, understand me well, I'm not saying that the St. Jude project as is going to take just as much money. I have no way of knowing that. But I'm saying, if it is that to complete the project is going to take us another $100 million, please show us where and how and why. And if constructing a new hospital is going to take less time than completing this hospital, the construction of a new hospital is going to take less time than completion of this hospital. If the resources to rebuild or to build a new hospital is going to be less than the money it will take to complete this hospital, show us, tell us how and why. And after you've done that, get on with the business of doing it. Because the citizens of St. Lucia, specifically the citizens of the south of St. Lucia, deserves a medical institution that they can turn to in the time of distress without second guessing the decision, to be serviced there without praying to St. Rita or to St. Jude that when they leave the hospital, that they will leave cured or not worse off. These are the issues that we, especially the people of the South, want answered. And I know in Cabinet there are people from the South who should be more so inclined to get us out of the hospitalium. More so inclined to get us out of the... And as I said last week, it has always been my experience growing up in St. Lucia that anything below the Badalel is not a part of St. Lucia. So are we saying that we are going to continue with this mindset and make the people of the South suffer, despite the fact that we produced the first female Gigi, despite the fact that the people of the South have produced not one, but 2 prime ministers? Despite the fact that the people of the South continue to excel for years in sports and education and not received recognition adequately for it as a people of the South. That is food for thought for you, the Cabinet of Ministers, for you, the government, Cabinet and opposition. Let us rethink the way we view and look at the people of the South. We are people too. Southern lives in St. Lucia matter. With that, I bid you adieu until next week.